Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, entitled Creation of the Universal Form, verse number 36. Tapi Kirtayami Yata Mati Yata Shritam Kirtim Harer Sam Sat Kartum Giram Anyabi Hasatim Tapi Kirtayami Yata Mati Yata Shritam Kirtim Harer Sat Kartum Giram Anyabi Hasatim Tapi Kirtayami Yata Mati Yata Shritam Kirtim Harer Samsat Kartum Giram Anya Vivasatim.
Prabhu, sorry.
What?
We read this verse yesterday.
I can't hear you.
We read this verse yesterday.
Why wasn't I told? It says 36, I'm supposed to give class on. Verse 37. Ekanta Labam Vachaso Nu Punsam Shushloka Oler Unam Badam Ahu Shute Cha Vivadbir Pakartayam Tata Sudayam Upasamparyogam. So now you have to tell everyone who's giving class for the length of this schedule what the story is on a daily basis. Or you have to have not to bar revert the whole thing. Ekantalabam Vachaso Pumsam Shlokamoler Gunavadamahu Shrutischa Vivadbir Upakataryam Dasudayam Pasam Prayogam Ekantalabam Vachaso Pumsam
Shlokamoler
Shutescha Vidvadbir Upakritayam Dasudayam Upasamprayogam Ekantalabam Vachaso Pumsam Shlokamoler Gunavadamahu Shutescha Vidvadbir Upakritayam Dasudayam Upasamprayogam
Ekantalabdam Vachaso Nupumsam Sushloka Mauler Gunavadamahu Shrutescha Vidvadbir Upakritayam Kata Sudayam Upasam Prayogam
Ekantalopam vachasonu pumsam
Ekantalabam vachasonu pumsam
Sushlokamuler gunavadam ahu
Shushlokamulir gunavadamahu
Shrutechcha vidvadbhir upakritayam
Shutescha vidvadbir upakritayam
Kathasudyam upasam prayogam
Kathasudayam upasamprayogam
Ekantalabham vakasunu pamsayam
Ekantalabam vachasonu pumsam
Susloka malia gunavadamahu
Shushlokamule gunavadamahu
Sustescha vidvadbir uprakritayam
Shutescha vidvadbir upakritayam
Kata sudhayam upasam prayogam
Kathasudayam upasamprayogam
Ekanta,
Ekanta
the one which has no comparison.
The one which has no comparison.
Labam,
Labam
Yin, Vachasa,
Vachasa,
by
by
discussions.
discussions.
Nupam
Rupam
after the Supreme Person.
after the Supreme Person.
Shloka,
Shloka,
bias. Malay, activities.
Gunavadam,
Glorification.
glorification.
Ahu, it is so said.
It is so said.
Shute, of the ear.
Of the year.
Cha,
Cha,
also.
also.
Vivadbi,
Vivadbi,
by the learned. Kartayam,
Bhagavatam,
being so edited.
being
so
so
edited.
edited.
Katasudayam,
Tadasudayam,
in the nectar of such a transcendental message.
in the nectar of such a transcendental message.
Upasam prayogam,
Upasamprayogam
serves the real purpose.
serves the real purpose.
Nearer to. Translation. The highest perfection and gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the highest actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. Please repeat, the highest perfection and gain of humanity
The highest perfection and gain of humanity
is to engage in discussions
is to engage in discussions
of the activities and glories
of the activities and
of
glories
the pious actor.
of the pious actor.
Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing
Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing
by the greatly learned sages
by the greatly learned
that
sages
the actual purpose of the ear
that the actual purpose of the ear
is served just by being near them.
is served just by being near them.
Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The impersonalists are very much afraid of hearing the activities of the Lord because they think that the happiness derived from the transcendental situation of Brahman is the ultimate goal of life. They think that anyone's activities, even that of the personality of Godhead, is mundane. But the idea of happiness indicated in this verse is different because it relates to the activities of the Supreme Personality who has transcendental qualities. The word gunavadam is significant because the qualities of the Lord and His activities and pastimes are the subject matter for the discussions of devotees. A rishi like Maitreya is certainly not interested in discussing anything pertaining to mundane qualities, yet he says that the highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. Srila Jiva Goswami, therefore, concludes that topics regarding the transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of Kali-Valya happiness. These transcendental activities of the Lord are so arranged in writing by the great sages that simply by hearing of those narrations, one becomes perfectly self-realized, and the proper use of the ear and the tongue is also achieved. Srimad Bhagavatam is one of such great literatures, and the highest perfectional stage of life is attained simply by hearing and reciting its contents. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sarvajatam Savanam Raghunatam Vikantam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Surato Pambo Mamandana Tergati Matsarvasva Kadambojo Radha Madana Mohan Divya Vindaranya Kalpajumala Srimad Ratnagara Sinasana Sto Srimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prestalabi Sevyamano Smarami Srimad Rasa Vasarambi Vamsi Bhata Tatastitaha Karsham Venu Svanar Gopir Gopinatha Shriestuna Dr. Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Krishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktamrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ekanta Labam Pataso Sam Shushloka Moler Gunava Upakatar Yam Kata Sudayam Upasamprayogam. The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the learned sages. What is that noise? Oh. That the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. So, the beginning of the discussions between Maitreya, Muni, and Vidura. This chapter, Creation of the Universal Form, has much detailed information of the manifestation of all the different constituents of the universe, their chronology, their order, their purpose. Now, coming towards the end of the chapter, beginning in verse 35, Maitreya, O Vidura, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work, and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the personality of Godhead? And in these concluding verses of the chapter will conclude on verse 40, he is expressing in a very personal way, based on his mature realization, how he is inspired to describe the glories of the Lord. In spite of my inability, whatever I've been able to hear from the spiritual master and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech. For otherwise, my power of speaking would remain asatim, unchaste. There's a similar Shukadeva Goswami's invocation prayers to Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the chapter entitled Process of Creation, chapter 4 of the second canto. He's saying that unless I am engaged in glorification of the Lord, no, he's saying, which is a constituent to what's being said here, a different way, that he's praying to the Lord to decorate his statements. And in the purport, Prabhupada relates the same idea, that otherwise our words remain simply unchaste. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would give the story, and Prabhupada would relate, or the idea that the frog croaks very loudly, inviting the snakes of death to come eat them. So any sound vibration which is not meant for the pleasure of the Lord or his glorification is simply inviting death, and is a terrible waste of time. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental, and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and impure. The existence of the conditioned soul can be purified only by the method of engaging mind and speech in the service of the Lord. Even such noble causes as the so-called freedom in human society not to be under tyranny and demoniac government control, as we're seeing now with these ridiculous forced mandates and injections with these questionable vaccines, and people are protesting. But there's the ultimate higher principle involved in that this is karmic reaction on a very large scale, primarily for meat eating and abortion. And unless these activities are stopped, then whatever noble discussions about freedom and equality are more or less a useless waste of time. Because ultimately everything stems from disobedience to the will of the Lord, and what to speak of outright ignorance and denying the Lord's even existence. So it may be interesting from a particular point of view to understand what's going on, but we always have to keep in mind, because we've been blessed by taking shelter at the feet of the bona fide spiritual master, actually what the situation is. Everyone else does not know. So in today's verse, very nice, the word pious actor, shushloka, pious, mole, actor, activities. Usually we hear the word pious and impious activities. Prabhupada describes striving to become pious after being impious might be nice, but it is simply, Prabhupada says in one place, like unintelligent children riding on a Ferris wheel or merry-go-round, going up and down. From the highest planet down to the lowest, all are places of repeated birth and death. When they've exhausted their pious activities, they fall from the heavenly planets and come back down to this planet. The idea of happiness in this verse is different because it relates to the activities of the personality of Godhead. So here in the verse, the word pious is capital P. So Krishna's activities are actually pious. We think of the word pious, it's used in Judeo-Christian terminology, it is something good, to be a pious person. But on the level of karmic activities, that you give charity or you do something pious, then you have to come back in the next life to have the favor returned to you. It's not transcendental. It doesn't free you from this material world. If it's not done in Shuddha Sattva goodness, that to the proper person at the proper time for the proper purpose. And ultimately, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, in the 3rd chapter, verses 76 through 78 of the Adi Leela, of all a man may sacrifice, a sacrifice for the Sankirtan movement is most glorious. All others are to be considered foolish by comparison, because nothing can compare for a sacrifice for the Sankirtan movement. And then he goes on to say that if one thinks that even, I forget the exact number, I think it's an astronomical number, 10 million Ashvamedha sacrifices at the confluence of the Ganges and Yamuna Saraswati is equal to one performance of Sankirtan. He's a Pashandi, or an atheist and fit to go to hell. Such extraordinary comparison. That's how important is the glorification of the Supreme Lord exclusively, ekanta bhakti, ekanta, that which has, the one which has no comparison, gain, labam. The impersonalists are very much afraid of hearing the activities of the Lord because they think the happiness derived from the transcendental situation of Brahman is the ultimate goal of life. They think that anyone's activities, even that of the personality of Godhead, is mundane. There's so many problems with the Mayavadis and the impersonalists. Bhavananda Prabhu, he was one of the first organizers and leaders, along with Jayapataka Swami in Mayapur. And one time Prabhupada was walking on they were walking, and there's the paddy fields. And one paddy field to the other, there might be like a drainage or a canal, and you have to cross over water. So Prabhupada in the morning walk, he took Bhavananda's assistants to hold on to him crossing. And when he was done, Prabhupada made this very dramatic, just throwing his arm away, like, I don't need you anymore. And Prabhupada went on to explain that this is the Mayavadi, that they take help from the Guru, and when they think that they're sufficiently or properly situated in their imagined idea that they are God, they throw the Guru away. Or even worse, that you kill the Guru and move his dead body out, and then you sit on his seat. So, one aspect of impersonalism is you don't even know how to be a gentleman. You don't even know how to be a proper person to reciprocate with others. This was Bhavananda, he spoke that this was his realization. They're not even gentlemen, not even grateful for what was done. So, the proper way to understand the spiritual master is that you can never, ever occupy his post. You can never think yourself more learned, more advanced, more qualified than the predecessor spiritual master. That is the death knell to your bhakti if you think like that. And Prabhupada, Bhavananda went on to say that, related the story, again become a mouse. A mouse is troubled by the cat. He comes to the yogi, my dear sir, please help me. Yes, what do you want? I want to become a cat. You become cat. After some time, what is it? What is your problem? Sir, the dog is bothering me, always chasing me. What do you want? I want to become a dog. Become dog. After some time, now what is the trouble? Sir, the tiger is always chasing me. So what do you want? I want to become tiger. All right, you become tiger. And not after some time, but right away. What is this? You want to eat me? Yes. Oh, you want to eat me? Again become mouse. So, of course, Prabhupada relates that to becoming puffed up in human society, exploiting the resources of material nature. Now they have all this technology and they want to like microchip everybody and like biometrically face analyze and like control everybody's thoughts and just like, just crazy stuff. So Prabhupada related that in that case to don't take from the spiritual master transcendental knowledge and whatever the spiritual master facilitates to you, and then think that you're more qualified, because again you will become a mouse. In the Bhagavad-Gita, in the 4th chapter, there's no Bhagavad-Gita here. Quick, hardbound. Verse 10, Krishna himself describes the misfortune and unhappiness of the impersonalist view or conception of life, and in regards to what we're hearing here, how hearing the narrations about Krishna's activities, and of course the greatest and most beautiful of all of his activities are his activities in relationship to his loving relationship with his topmost devotees in Goloka Vrindavan. This is the ultimate and supreme achievement. Srila Sanatana Goswami describes in the Brihad Bhagavatam Ritam the ascension through all different realms, ultimately of Gopakumar, to ultimately achieve the supreme perfection in relationship with Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. Hence it is called Brihad Bhagavatam Rita, the great Srimad Bhagavatam. Vita Raga Bhaya Kroda Manmaya Man Upashrita Bhavo Jnana Tapasa Puja Mam Bhavam Agata. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. As it is described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. The opposite of Satchit Ananda. Therefore, people in general keep the same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal. And because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that one reason why people commit heinous crimes, murder, or even on a large scale, crimes against humanity, because they don't understand what awaits them in the hellish planets. They think it would just cease to exist. One Nazi war criminal being led to the execution just said, "Schnell, do it quickly," thinking it would just all be over and my problem will be solved. Little did they know. when they are they're afraid to become persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence, attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. So then Prabhupada goes on to describe the other ways of being, other defined mentalities in relationship to impersonalism. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all. Being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation, they become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. People who go past us every day, in just like oblivion, just ignoring us. A lot of times they're thinking, wow, there's just another religion or just some other kind of, crazy philosophical way of thinking about things. But ultimately, such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculations out of hopelessness. Sometimes we'll even meet people who in the beginning seem to be spiritually interested, but if you talk to them, then their idea is that we're all God and everything is one. And until they become purified, actually, it's useless to speak with them. And by speaking with them, revealing the glories of the Lord too much to them, it puts them in a position where they will most likely make offenses. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. Prabhupada was big time up against this when he started the movement here in New York and even more in San Francisco in 1966. In 1967, they had a term called LSD saint. If one was to take LSD, he should be given all the respect that he's practically God, and if you try to disturb them, the whole neighborhood would be down on us. In describing Hayagriva Prabhu, who walking down Houston Street east, just before 2nd Avenue, where the 2nd Avenue subway is, now they have, and from between Bowery and 2nd Avenue, so you can meditate if you ever walk there. This is where Prabhupada met Hayagriva, and Hayagriva living with Kirtanananda, Umapati, and several others in some squalor apartment on Mott Street, described how each one was eclectically mixing, from their various readings, Whitman, this one, that one, and the whole thing, and the whole thing would be thrown for reevaluation when someone took an LSD trip. This was the group that Hayagriva returned to and said, there's a Swami who just started a storefront on 2nd Avenue. Let's go and see. And their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of material consciousness: attachment to material life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. To get free from these, so to become purified from these three stages of material conception of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. Dinabandhu, who joined in 1969 on the West Coast, I think maybe Los Angeles, but he relates that Prabhupada one time, he looked at everyone, the entire assembly of devotees, said, if you simply follow these regulative principles and chant 16 rounds Every day for the rest of your life, you'll all go back home, back to Godhead. Take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. And then Prabhupada goes on to describe the stages of devotional service as described in devotion by Srila Rupa Goswami. Tato Shraddha, Tata Sadhu, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Tato Nartha Nivritti Syat, Tato Nitis Ruchis Tata. Ata Shaktis Tato Bhavas, Tata Prema Yadanchati, Sadakanam Ayam Premna, Padur Bhave Bhavet Krama. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. Next, one becomes initiated, and under the instruction of the spiritual master, the neophyte begins the process of bhakti. By execution of bhakti under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness and self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further toward attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of Godhead. Real love of God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So by the slow process of devotional service under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustration that result in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain the abode of the Supreme Lord. So this is the problem that everyone faces, not understanding the activities of the pious actor. So as devotees, we must be very, very sincere and serious to complete the course of devotional service, so that ultimately the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are constantly there in our mind and consciousness. We glorify the pure devotee on a regular daily basis, that he's always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited activities of Krishna. Shri Radhika Madhavayora Madhurya Lila Guna Rupanam Nam Pratikshanas Vadana Lolupasya, always eager. Unlimited transcendental activities, he's always thinking of them. And more, by such thinking, he's actually engaged in the direct service of the Lord. A rishi like Maitreya is certainly not interested in discussing anything pertaining to mundane qualities. Yet he says that the highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. Srila Jiva Goswami therefore concludes that topics regarding the transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of Kaivalya happiness. These transcendental activities of the Lord are so arranged in writing by the great sages, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, from the Srimad Bhagavatam is the direct incarnation of the Lord, and is likened unto the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam from Canto 1 all the way to the 10th Canto and beyond, is meditating, the proper way of meditating, especially as described in the 3rd Canto, Explanation and Devotional Service by Kapila Dev, meditating first on the lotus feet of the Lord, gradually rising fully purified and qualified to directly meditate on the smiling lotus face of the Lord, which is personified as the 10th Canto. So arranged in writing by the great sages that simply by hearing of those narrations, one becomes perfectly self-realized. In the preface, that if one goes carefully of the Bhagavatam, one is sure to become a God-realized soul after reading the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. I know many devotees getting that and reading that were very inspired to take up the process of spiritual life and surrender to Srila Prabhupada. Simply by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam carefully, one is sure to become a perfectly God-realized souls. This is the proper use of the ear and tongue. The proper use of the ear and tongue is also achieved. Srimad Bhagavatam is one of such great literatures, and the highest perfectional stage of life is attained simply by hearing and reciting its contents. Srimad Bhagavatam and translated literature is so miraculous, Prabhupada described, anywhere you bite into the sweet ball, it is sweet. Or that Shrinvatam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. The Lord personally cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his message. So this chapter is concluding. O son, the original poet Brahma, after mature meditation for 1,000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the jugglers. That potential power is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord, so it is certainly unknown to others. And the conclusion of this chapter, such a wonderful verse and concept. Words, mind, and ego with their respective controlling demigods have failed to achieve success in knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, we simply have to offer our respectful obeisances unto him as a matter of sanity. So, hearing and chanting and glorifying the Supreme Lord is a matter of sanity and is a symptom of those who are sane. In the Bhagavad-Gita in one purport, when one declares himself a non-devotee, it is, I think it's in the first canto, anyway, wherever. When one declares himself a non-devotee, it is understood that such a person is in an unsane condition of life. So we aspire to go back home, back to Godhead, where everyone is sane. Everyone here on the bodily conception of life is insane. Maya, that which is not. They're accepting that which is not to be something that is real and valuable. So we should be very intelligent. We should be very sharp in our discrimination, and that must be maintained all the time throughout our life. And by the mercy of the spiritual master, one is given the weapon of transcendental knowledge to defeat the enemy of illusion. That's clearly described by Narada Muni. Achyuta Bala, the strength of Lord Balaram, the spiritual master, in the 7th canto. So we'll stop here. Thank you very much. The verse once again. Ekanta labam vachasanupam sam shushloka moler guna vadam ahu shutescha vivadbir upakataryam kata sudayam upasamprayogam. The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the capital P, pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. What to speak of hearing, even by being near, even if they touch the book. Prabhupada, they're throwing the books in the trash. Well, they touched the book before they threw it in the trash. They're throwing their babies in the trash. What is to be done? So that is the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? Hare Krishna.
First, I want to say that this name of Krishna used here is very interesting by an actor.
Yeah.
Because the activities of Krishna are wonderful and amazing.
You speak a little louder.
The activities of Krishna are wonderful and amazing, and he is known as the greatest actor. He is also known as the greatest dancer. And I wanted to ask, in the purport that you wrote from Bhagavad-Gita, for them, it is said, so by the slow process of devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage. Why it is said the slow process? Why the slow?
Well,
What Prabhupada
we can't guess to understand the mind of Srila Prabhupada, but we can surmise that we don't want to become sahajiya. We don't want to rush the process in such a way that we falsely imagine ourselves to be more advanced than we actually are, while we're still equating material activities as spiritual. And people in their so-called New Agey ideas, they, there's all this psychophysical babble and they call it spiritual, usually relating to sex life and romantic relationship between men and women, or whoever and whoever these days. Whoever and whatever. It's spiritual. So slow, we could also say use the word careful. What is it? Sacrifice, penance, charity should never be given up because they purify even the great souls. Again, the nature of impersonalist. In the beginning I'm very good and I'm very... At a certain point, they just throw it all away. All these like bogus yogis, Yes! All these women around them, and you can have sex and this and that. And, there was this horrible fellow in Oregon called Bhagavan Rajneesh. His whole thing was like taken down by legal authorities. So they achieve some type of position through austerity and penance, but then they just use it for like even the most sinful type of hedonistic activities. So devotees are so, honest persons are so warned. What is it? Even in Indra stole the 100th horse for sacrifice in Maharaj Prithu, and like when he's being chased by, I forget the son's name, Maharaj Prithu, he adopts the false position of a sannyasi. And by his adoption of the false dress of a sannyasi, it created so much disturbance in religious society to this very day. So how's that an answer? Why is Prabhupada using the word slow process? Also, Rupa Goswami, Uttaha Nischaya Daryat, patient. One must enthusiasm, confident, patience. Hare Krishna. Anything else?
Well, one of the things that's interesting is in personal philosophy is usually the direction that a person will wind up in if they have no spiritual master and they're just simply trying to understand the nature of the world from their own mental speculation. That's why it's in philosophical circles, it's called the Perennial Philosophy. So what that means is that if you're just sitting at home by yourself and you go to some meetings or you read some esoteric books, likely you'll come to the conclusion of Mayavad philosophy. It appears to answer many questions, why there are many religions, So, well, some people like to call the Supreme Allah, some call him Krishna, some call him Jesus, some call him something else. And in this way we can understand, that's why there are many religions, because the real truth is formless. And one can imagine a form like Krishna or Allah or Jesus or so. But actually the real supreme truth is formless. And therefore, actually, all the major religions of the world have a impersonal wing to them. For Islam, it's the Sufis. For, Judaism, it's kind of more the Kabbalists. And, there are other, for Christianity, it was originally just the Gnostics, but then, most of Christianity kind of went off the deep end into impersonalism. And now many of the major religions of the world are half sunk into impersonalism without realizing the consequences of it. And so, nirvishesha shunyavadi paschata desha tarine. So Prabhupada, his pranam mantra suggests that he was here to save the world from impersonalism and voidism. There are also voidists, the Buddhists, but they're not quite as plentiful as the impersonalists. And so it's a natural conclusion to come to, but then it goes nowhere, and it's not a conclusion that gives anyone a fulfillment, and it doesn't answer the question of where personality came from. Why are we persons in the first place? So at any rate, I just thought I'd add that bit.
And what to speak of, particularly in India, the Muslims, they were so angry at the personal conception of the devotees that they created great havoc and destruction. So there's a demoniac element to that type of impersonalism.
Yeah, actually, both Islam and Judaism have this staunch belief that God must be formless. Of course, in most of Christianity, it's that way too. So all these faith traditions have this, and it comes from the Ten Commandments.
But thou shalt not worship a brazen image.
Yeah, one shall not. Imagine some graven image which is likened to something that flies in the air or is under the sea or is under the ground under the sea or something like that. And one shall not bow down and worship them, for I am a jealous God, and I delivered thee from the land and bondage of Egypt, and I will punish to the 100th generation those who follow such a thing, and on the other side of the coin, I will...
Yeah, and we still see the disciples and descendants and followers of such crazy philosophy out at Harinam. You people are...
Right. Right, so that's where it comes from. But the mistaken understanding is that the commandment really is saying that one should not substitute some other thing for the Supreme, as opposed to that the Supreme has any form at all. So that's where the mistake is.
Yeah, that's why we have to, stick to Bhagavad-Gita. But in Israel, they told me the Hebrew, it says God should say you should see only my form. And the graven image thing that, you should see only my form. But they're saying there's no form somehow or other. And so that spreads, and that's why like Israel doesn't recognize Hinduism as a bona fide, so many things, but God has a form, it's everywhere in all the scriptures. But they lost track of it. That's why Lord Chaitanya, he convinced that Muslim Iman from the Pathans, based on the Quran, which we don't get the exact what he said, but that Krishna is God, the person. And the guy agreed, So, but, you have to know the Quran really inside out.
In the Om Shalom that he had a discussion with Rabbi Schimmel, and Rabbi Schimmel was describing that there was in the tradition of the Jewish tradition that there was of course, Moses Maimonides is very influential in Judaism. And he was the one that really pushed forward the idea that God must be formless. And there was another person at the time, another rabbi, who spoke against it. I forget what his name was, but history remembers Moses Maimonides, and it doesn't remember the rabbi that spoke about it. Because in the Bible, it talks about the right hand of God, it talks about the face of God, the back of God. So if he's got a right hand, there's good reason to believe he's probably got a left one too. And he talks, right. So, there's all this imagery, and so therefore, you can make a case in the Bible that the Lord certainly does have a form. And in some books of the Bible, he's even described as having a darkish form, which is interesting. So this is there. But modern interpretations since Moses Maimonides, because Christianity followed Moses Maimonides as well, and so did Islam, there's this idea that the Supreme Lord cannot have any form. So Prabhupada certainly had his task cut out for him to, rid the Western world of this impersonal conception, which goes nowhere and inspires no one, and is a complete spiritual dead end.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi Haribol.